Good afternoon, everybody. And on this really quite horrible rainy day, it almost feels like a benefit of lockdown that we can sit at home and enjoy this concert instead of having to wander out and get cold and wet and whatever. But anyway, welcome to our Intermezzo at Home concert. It's the 10th, believe it or not. I mean, that's a sad thought as well, isn't it? But it's very good to see you all today. We had hoped that we'd be able to bring you another live performance, but unfortunately the new lockdown restrictions, coupled with the colleges and schools remaining closed, have meant that our performer today, William Bracken, isn't able to be in London, and he has therefore recorded his performances earlier this week, especially for us. He is, however, with us today to introduce the music. And William, we're very grateful to you for making today possible. William is currently studying at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama and is also a Concordia Foundation artist. So again, we send our thanks to Gillian Humphreys, its indefatigable founder, and to Natasha Day, who is almost as indefatigable in her work as its administrator. William is starting his recital with the overture from Bach's Partita No. 4 in D. We're going to go straight into that. I'll unmute you at the end so you can show your appreciation, and then William will talk about that and he'll introduce the next work. So over to David Conn, for whose expertise in managing the technicalities around the recordings. We're very grateful, to start us off.
Thank you all very much for coming. And that was the overture from Bach's Fourth Partita in D. And the partitas were his first published works. So really his first, sorry, hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, great. His first published work.
Sorry, William, could you unmute yourself? That's it.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So the partitas are these very multicultural dance suites, and they feature different dances from all over Europe, and the overture, of course, being inspired by the French overture of the 17th century, which is characterized by those very regal sounding dotted rhythms. I think these partitas also possess a kind of quality of mischief almost left over from Bach's life as a young man. And in the fugue that followed the overture, there's a real kind of sense of fun, which is great when playing those pieces. The next piece I'm going to be playing is Beethoven's Sonata Opus 27, number 1, which is really one of the lesser played sonatas by Beethoven, but it's a gem, really. It's the sibling of the Moonlight Sonata, and they share the same opus number. And it's a shame that really, although the Moonlight Sonata is a great work, it somewhat overshadows this E-flat Sonata, which I think is equally deserving of fame. And the sonata is marked quasi una fantasia, meaning in the style of a fantasia. And a fantasia is a form of free improvisation in which Beethoven was certainly more than competent in executing, and he was actually much more sought after as an improviser during his lifetime than he was as a composer or pianist. And I think with this piece and with Moonlight, you certainly get a sense of, you can really imagine Beethoven sitting down at the keyboard and coming up with these extraordinary compositions, which is actually how a large majority of the piano works were actually written, him just sitting down at the piano and noodling around. But already this idea of a style in a sonata in the style of a fantasia is very radical, and it's a kind of foreshadowing of this compositional extremism, which is very present in his later music. The sonata is in 4 movements, and each movement is marked attacca, meaning that it should be played into the next without a break. And this is also very much in the style of a fantasia, this kind of metamorphosing and ever evolving, ever changing, but one very complete unit. But the thing that I love most about this piece is really its originality. I mean, the first movement is almost unrecognizable sonata form. And I think this is the area in which Beethoven is really moving things forward in a kind of extraordinary departure from the idiomatic structures that he was taught to follow. So without further ado, David, here's the Beethoven's Sonata Opus 27, number 1, Quasi una Fantasia. Thank you. Thank you. I'm now going to be playing some preludes by Debussy, and these are really wonderful pieces that I only sort of came to appreciate in the last few years, and they are benchmarks of the piano repertoire, and they really stray very far from the real origins of the prelude and become this kind of untouchable high art. I think one of the things that really marks them apart in the listening experience is the lack of a sense of narrative in the Germanic sense, which was very much the music writing form of the century preceding it. And what I mean by that is that there's not always a clearly discernible musical line, and it's more of an experience of almost looking at something, seeing the same thing from different angles, and constantly having new thoughts about what it might be. And this is very much apparent in the first prelude I'm going to play, which is called Les sons et les parfums tournant dans l'air soir, meaning sounds and scents swirling in the evening air, which is a very evocative line from a poem by Charles Baudelaire called Harmonie de Soir. And this prelude is a wonderful example of Debussy's phenomenal capacity for translating the five senses into sound, into music, and the reflection of the poem is quite astonishing. The prelude after, which directly follows that, called Les collines d'Anacapri, meaning the hills of Anacapri, Anacapri being an island off the southern coast of Italy. This is one of the more light-hearted preludes. I believe it was inspired by an image on the label of a wine bottle that Debussy saw. And you can hear the influence of folk music. And for me, it conjures images of sort of sunlight reflecting off the water, and the piece is in the key of B major with five sharps, which is one of the brightest keys. So I think that's how it evokes this kind of feeling of sunlight. The prelude after that will be called La Puerta del Vino, meaning the gate to the vineyard. And I believe this is inspired by a picture that was on a postcard that was sent to Debussy by the Spanish composer Manuel de Falla. And Debussy manages to depict the characteristics of Spain with extraordinary accuracy, despite having never actually been there. Actually, I think he was there for one day, but no longer than that. And you get the very impassioned and sensual vocal nature of the habanera in this piece, and Debussy marks un mouvement de habanera. The prelude after that, which I'm going to play, is called Les tierces alternées, meaning alternating thirds. And it's quite unique in the set. It's the only prelude of the 24 which is non-programmatic, in the sense that it doesn't have an extra musical source or inspiration. So the piece is composed entirely of major and minor thirds, and it's wonderfully abstract. I sort of imagine a visual equivalent of seeing kind of maybe like squares of different shapes and different colors, but one piece made up of just squares. So it's a very interesting compositional experiment, and perhaps one of the most creative preludes in this sense. And the final prelude, which I will play, is called General Levine, which is a musical portrait of a sort of clown, faux military comedic character who was based on a real person called Edward Levine. And there were plans which the plans were never finalized, of course, of a comedy show which featured this character, General Levine. And Debussy was down to write the incidental music for that, but it never happened. So it's quite possible that this prelude features the material that was going to be used in that show, but it's full of sort of slapstick and comedic elements. It is really very, very funny indeed. So here are a selection of preludes by Claude Debussy. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to Richard for pointing out that I'd inadvertently left my laundry in the backdrop. I apologize for that. And the final piece in my program is Liszt's second Hungarian Rhapsody, which you may recognize from a famous Tom and Jerry cartoon, which made a large impression on me as a child. And Liszt is a composer who, again, only quite recently I fully appreciated his incredible influence on the progression of music history. Certainly the later compositions, which became utterly profound and very groundbreaking. And Liszt is often stereotyped to be this kind of great showman, rock star type character, which he certainly was, but I think the integrity of his compositions can often be overlooked because of that. And I think that's really a real injustice. Having said that, the Hungarian Rhapsodies are early works, and this is certainly a piece which is full of piano pyrotechnics, but there's also a certain depth about the first slow section, the Lassan, which Liszt marks Andante mesto, meaning sadly. And it's worth remembering that I think Hungary at the time had one of the highest suicide rates in Europe, and all of this Hungarian folk music came from the poorer divisions of society and not from the aristocracy. So I believe that perhaps Liszt is almost taking on a voice of the people in these rhapsodies. It's also worth mentioning that Liszt invites the performer to play a cadenza on the penultimate page, which would traditionally have been improvised. And Liszt was certainly known as a formidable improviser. And although I didn't manage to improvise a cadenza myself, over the Christmas period, I did manage to write one. So the performance will feature an original cadenza before the final coda. So thank you once again for coming. And this is Liszt's second Hungarian Rhapsody in C sharp minor. Thank you.
William, thank you so much for a fascinating, really good program and beautiful playing. And also thank you for your very informative introductions, which I think we all appreciated. And our next concert will be on Thursday, the 11th of February, when we hope, perhaps against hope, to be able to bring you a live cello and piano recital by Oskar Horvat and Irina Likhayovskaya. And that will include music by Fauré, Brahms, and Defaya. And as always, we depend on your generosity to enable us to put on these concerts. And we pay our artists a full fee, so anything you can give us is greatly appreciated. There was a donation link in the email yesterday, and I've put the link again in the chat. So thank you all for coming. With thanks again to William. I will unmute you for a final round of applause. But actually, just before I do that, next Thursday, Forum, that's on the 21st of January, Dr. David Marsh, a historian with a particular expertise in art and historic gardens, will be speaking. And the following Thursday, there's another of our musical choices series where the theme will be musical pairs. So everybody, thank you for coming, and stay safe.